After less than a century under the British Crown, India's most crucial hour has struck. An era has ended, a new epoch begins.
Hey man,
So, what's up, dude?
what's up? Tell my friends your name.
Tejas,
Full name.
Tejas Shea.
When you meet a foreigner and you have to explain your name, how do you help them get your name?
I try to say contagious.
Nice. I love it. All right. Can you look into the camera and say, "Who's your daddy?"
Who's your daddy?
And now look in the camera and say, "Daddy, daddy cool."
Daddy, daddy cool.
What a champ. Awesome. So, Dad, as you know, we've been having this amazing community on WhatsApp called the Jungli community that's really excited about what we're building in Dandeli and this new chapter that we're writing, opening up our ancestral home to nomads, artists, entrepreneurs from around the world. And they have a lot of questions and they're very interested to know the history of the land. Lal Bhai Patel, my great-grandfather, your grandfather. So maybe let's start all the way at the beginning. Before we talk about you, let's talk about where you also came from. So can you tell us about this figure, Lal Bhai Patel, and how he's founded this company in Dandeli? Let's start with that.
Yeah, he's quite a character. In fact, I've always wanted somebody to make a movie on him.
First podcast, then a movie.
Sure. I believe he was born in Ahmedabad and then he was adopted, as was custom then.
Okay.
Another relative family didn't have a male child, so they adopted him because they wanted him to be the heir to their family and their wealth. Then that family got a male child after a few years.
But they already had adopted him.
They already adopted him. So I think they tried to poison him. And his grandmother, Maji is what we used to call her, she was a very loving and kind lady. So she actually rescued him from that house and brought him back to her house.
Wow. So he nearly died without even knowing it.
Exactly, when he was young. I don't know, in those days people used to die quite a bit. So they were very keen to have male heirs because that's how property transferred in those.
And this was British India,
Sure, this is British.
right?
India.
What year was Lal Bhai Patel born?
Just the turn of the century. I don't know the exact
Yeah.
age.
1901, something like that.
Yeah,
Sounds about right.
This is what I've read on the
And 1964 he died? No.
67.
67 he died. Right. And so he was also, after his formative years, and he luckily managed to survive almost being poisoned by his adopted family, which is pretty hectic.
Yeah.
He then was involved in the freedom fighter movement.
No, hang on. Before that,
Okay.
He moved to Bombay, started doing business. I think Tata's had started DDT.
It's a pesticide.
So he was inspired at that time by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose.
Okay.
So the aggressive,
Violent.
violent freedom movement. And over time, he was influenced by many people, amongst them Moraji Desai. And he also then switched to the Gandhian system.
Right.
But he was the front as a freedom fighter. He was quite a leader. But for the British, he ran industry.
Right. So that was what he would kind of report, right?
The British were in control of India, and all the freedom fighters used to be taken care of by him. So they would come at night. My aunt says it wasn't uncommon for her to have to serve dinner to Yusuf Meher Ali. Yusuf Meher Ali was a freedom fighter. Many freedom fighters she used to feed.
But this is in Bombay.
In Bombay when they came home. His job was he was a guy who used to take care of people when they went to the jail. So he had to take care of the families to make sure the food went to them and all of those things.
So if a freedom fighter from India was sent to jail, he
Yeah.
was looking after the
He
families.
was looking after the families and
Was he also helping them get out of jail, like prison break?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
Then I believe before India was independent, he had just as a businessman, he had amassed a fair bit of money which he used for the freedom movement.
Okay.
But he had got some mining leases in Karnataka. It's a good opportunity. That was heyday. Any business was great opportunity.
Right.
Right? So he went and picked up some mining leases and he had them there. Again, that was a time nobody made anything.
Right. So they're the first people making anything.
People, yeah. So you had a lot of industrial families, Marwadi families, Birlas, Tatas, all of them doing whatever they could in industry.
The startups
And
of that
everyone,
era.
yeah. Though that era, a lot of people started business. He then made it a point to go to Dandeli, where he had these leases and went to the leases.
So the only connection, this is the first time we're mentioning Dandeli, and the only connection was that he had mining leases from the state of Karnataka to mine around.
At that time, there was no state of Karnataka. This was Bombay.
Oh.
State of Bombay. This is Bombay state.
Because it's still British India or just after?
Yeah.
Just after?
It was British India.
It was British India?
Leases were provided while it was British India.
Okay.
And he had started investigating those leases because that was one more business that he was going to have a look at and things like that. Then after independence, he was there in full vigor because now he had to cater to his own family also.
Okay.
So he started.
So he moved to Dandeli.
Well, he was
Checked it
visiting
out.
Dandeli.
Checked it out, visited.
Yeah, he had his office in Fountain, and he used to take trips to Dandeli to get the mines going. And very soon, because that India was, you just made an effort, you got results.
Wow.
You know, you had to make an effort. You just had to make an effort.
Yeah.
So he then was the second largest mining company in India, second only to the Central Provinces Mining Company, which is today Moil.
Okay.
So
one sec, what was Dandeli like at that time when he went at that point?
Dandeli was not there. This is the mining company. The mining company
Right.
was the Nagri.
Right.
So Nagri Mining Company was run from Chapoli
Okay.
in the jungle, and actually that time it was run from a place called Londa.
Yeah.
So
train station.
that was a base camp, and then they would go to the mining areas. In the monsoon, you couldn't even enter the mining areas. There were no roads.
Crazy.
So things like that. So
And Dandeli, the town didn't exist. It
Dandeli town didn't exist then.
was just a jungle.
So because he was able to start this mining thing and made a whopping amount of money, because you just took the ore out, put it on the ship, and you got your money for all the ore that you exported.
Pretty good.
So he made a good bit of money. He was an affluent businessman. He says, "Where's this ore going? This ore is going to Europe." So what are they doing with the ore in Europe? They're smelting it into ferromanganese.
Okay.
It was a manganese ore, so they're smelting into ferromanganese. So they're great. So let's go out there and get a ferromanganese plant.
In Dandeli.
So then he decided to build the plant in Dandeli. Chose Dandeli because there's a river there. Chose the land, had the lease granted to them. Lease was granted in 55. You take over the area. The documents happen a little later.
Yeah. But we roughly say that 1955 is the year
55.
that Dandeli
Ferro. Which didn't
many
start
companies.
as Dandeli Ferro. That was his first company was Nagri Mining, and then he
Right.
started Electro-Metallurgical Works.
That's right.
what started at Dandeli.
That's right, yeah.
So that was 1955 when he started that. And the investor that he had was Dutch. So the Dutch investor had a manager who helped build the factory. The Norwegians provided the technology. Elkem technology was the furnace. And he built the furnace, and even the Elkem engineers who built the furnace with him, I have met some of them when I went to Norway. And it was really, really emotional meeting somebody who knew Granddad.
Damn.
Spoke so highly of Granddad.
Yeah, what did they say
They
of him?
said this guy was an illuminated face. He was reverential.
Wow.
He was somebody. You could make out immediately. And that he was special. And he worked very hard to make sure. And he went into the detail of every little thing. He knew every little bit. He would question every little thing.
Nice.
So he did that. They built the factory in 1955, and it's a very successful factory. There was a foreign investor who provided the investment and had put forth an Indian entrepreneur as their representative on the board. So the gentleman who was the representative on the board was Mr. Advani, who is the owner of the Blue Star Group,
The air conditioning group.
the air conditioning group. So he was on the board. So, come 5 years, it had done well. The arrangement was they would supply the ore. And then, when the contract was over, they offered the factory lock, stock, and barrel. At that time, it was a public limited company, Electrometallurgical Works. So, they offered Lalbhai, who had created everything, the first right. That, boss, we are giving you our shares. Please pay us for it.
Okay.
He didn't have that kind of money to pay for the entire
Buy them out.
shareholding.
Yeah.
So Mr. Advani of Blue Star, of course, saw this as a very profitable venture and said, I will definitely pay and take over the shares. They said, no. First right is Lalbhai's. If he refuses, we'll go to you. So Lalbhai was frantically hunting for somebody to finance him to pay for the shares.
So that he could own the company that he built.
100%. So, looking for that, a lot of people in India and in industry respected him for his principles and for his all the work that he done.
Goodwill, he was a generous guy as well.
Goodwill. He had a very big heart.
That's good.
So his competitor, because the entire ferroalloy industry was very grateful to him for having shown the way to a lot of people. So old India had only 5 ferroalloy industries, not even 5 at that time, 2 or 3. One of those old ferroalloy plants was Khandelwal.
Okay.
So Khandelwal Ferroalloys, which was in Nagpur, the gentleman, we just remember him as Babu Khandelwal, he came forth and he just provided Lalbhai whatever he wanted to get his factory.
Damn.
So we are really grateful to the Khandelwal family who gave him that blank check, so to say. And he bought the Norwegians out, the Dutch investors out, and had his own factory for himself.
It's like a mini independence of the ferroalloy company after the independence of India.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, that's cool.
So he bought it out, and that's when he had full control on his own company. So he had the mining industry, and he had a ferroalloy plant,
Which he owned.
and there were thousands of people who worked in the mines there.
Wow.
I think they were right up to peak strength. It went up to 5,000. I have another point to add here. When Lalbhai actually came to Chapoli and started mining, he recruited about 5,000 freedom fighters. It was any freedom fighter was given a job, and there were 5,000 of them with families who lived there. They didn't get jobs, so there were very few jobs in India at that time. So this was a great place to start working. I remember a freedom fighter called Ubashankar Dikshit. I think he was the manager and an amazing individual that we learned later. And all these freedom fighters moved to Dandeli, and there are people from Kashmir, Punjab, Bengal, Orissa, everywhere who live in Dandeli. That's why it's a bit of a cosmopolitan little town. Yeah, so a lot of people worked in the company, provided income. He had a trust going for their education, medical needs. So he was very benevolent. He used to do PF and all those kind of things before the government even started PF in India.
So PF is a provident fund, and basically it's an employee welfare so that you can take care of them at times of need. Right. So he was doing that proactively before it was regulated.
Before the government even regulated it. So,
Right.
Very few Tatas, Birlas. That's the kind of thinking that he had.
Okay.
That's the kind of thinking he imbibed in all of us, I guess. So his first daughter, Usha, she looked after the trusts, things like that. The second daughter, Nandini, he thought would be best deployed and was sent to Wharton.
Okay.
And I think was one of the first Wharton graduates in the MBA course. The eldest son was sent to Britain to get some training in metallurgy, and that's Hiren.
Right.
The youngest son then was my mother, Spita.
The youngest daughter.
Yeah, youngest daughter. And she was still studying at that point. And there's Bharat, the youngest son. The mother decided that since Lalbhai is dying, she wanted, and she was dying herself, Hindu, she decided that it's high time Spita gets married because Usha was married, Nandini was married, Hiren was also married at that time, and she was very keen to get Spita married.
Shadi kar le.
So they got Spita married.
Right.
And the gentleman they chose, in those days, there was a lot of dowry that was exchanged.
Dowry. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were very surprised that the groom they found didn't want dowry. So they said, wow, what a nice family.
Yeah.
Right? He has values, he has principles. This seems to be a good
Just
family.
for our foreign audience, the dowry is a payment that the bride's family has to make to the man, almost as a way of like quantifying or compensating for taking care of the daughter.
Yeah, whatever.
It's a very outdated system that is absolutely not
It's still
encouraged
practiced.
these days.
It's
It's
still
practiced
practiced very
definitely
big
in
in India.
villages and even in cities and towns in more traditional settings, but in more educated circles, it's definitely considered something that's
education is
off the
not the
past.
criteria. Education is the criteria.
Right, even in educated
Even
circles.
in education, it's only the thinking.
Yeah,
the
okay.
thinking is evolved. It's not there.
Yeah, yeah.
But so that's why they.
Anyway, so this is pretty cool that back then this groom's family didn't ask for dowry, but what happened after? And this is his mum he's talking about.
And father,
And
natural father.
Yeah.
So she was married much against her wishes. She must have been 16 or 17 years old. And just before I was born in the hospital, I believe my natural father was influenced by my paternal grandmother to ask Lal Bhai for a large sum of money which the family needed to settle their debts. I believe the sum of money in those days, 1963, is 11 lakhs.
Whoa, which was a lot.
Hell of a lot of money. And mother had got to know about it. And mother had made it very clear that whatever you do, you are not going to ask for this money from my father.
Yeah,
You figure it out, whatever else you want to do.
yeah.
So the young man actually went and asked. And she got to know when she was in hospital because the receptionist came back and told her that they had words. That's how she got to hear about it. And she decided there and then that she's not going home to that home. She's taking me, just born or whatever, to be born, and going straight home to her dad.
Wow.
And she did that.
This is a big move in 1963
Traditional
for
Gujarati
approximately,
family.
especially for the woman of the house to be so strong. And Smita Patel, who was his mum, I've never met her, but I've heard she was an absolute legend, way ahead of her time, super strong, confident, charismatic woman who I really wish that I got to meet. And I feel very connected to and inspired by, strangely. And yeah, she picked you up and she walked out on him.
Absolutely.
Divorce and separation was not a thing back then. And so she, especially led by the woman, like unheard of.
Lal Bhai was very keen that she goes back to the family.
Make it work.
And she made it clear to him that if you don't want me, I'm walking out of your house too. So I believe the shock must have hurt my grandmother a lot and may have led to her succumbing eventually because she was ill and she couldn't handle that one of her daughters would even go and divorce. Like in a Gujarati traditional family, that's not done.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So anyway, my granddad spent his years in bed. Many of those years I was with him and spent a lot of my formative child years.
So he was your father figure.
He was my father figure. When he died, there was a real precarious situation because the electricity price had been increased. India was in a recession in that year,
Right.
in 1967, when he died. And such a serious recession that they could not sell anything. The entire production was kept on the banyan tree now. You see that whole place was stocked with production. And they couldn't sell anything. They couldn't pay salaries to the whole staff. So the kitchen was instructed to make food for everybody and their families.
Oh my God.
So Hiren was at that time very active and he was interacting with the ministers and he was talking to the ministers for getting power and somehow getting sustenance because they weren't paying the electric bill because that was the major raw material. And they didn't have the money to pay the bill because none of the products being shipped. It was a standstill situation. So this is the situation in which he died.
Shit, that's tough.
So it was a tough time when he died. But post his dying, things got better in the sense Nandini had the reins of the company, the eldest daughter, the Wharton graduate.
Yeah.
So she ran the company. Bharat joined the fray. He had Lal Bhai's streak of going into details. He had a serious intent to learn.
Okay.
So he was an authority on everything. So he was definitely worthy of sheer respect for the way he operated on his knowledge.
So he grew quickly.
He grew very quickly. They had a wonderful time in those early years of 70s.
70s.
Very
Parties?
a lot of those. The 70s were a great era. Veena Ben used to take care of all the people. There were a lot of social programs. There's music programs. People would go to picnics. A lot of medical camps in the villages that were held.
So you could help the village.
Yes, a lot of things were built then. The clubhouse was built, the pool was built, the Ashiana bungalow was built. A lot of things were built in the late 70s. The managers' quarters were built. All this was built in the
Right.
70s. Those were the heydays.
Right.
It's interesting to note that we are now inviting traveling artists to Dandeli. Hiren Bhai, my uncle, was a very warm personality, and all the artists, he really inculcated a lot of them. We have paintings on the walls that have been done by Aziz, the famous horse painter Aziz. We used to stay here and paint so many paintings here. And we have Murti Mama, who sculpted so many wooden sculptures. It's right around everywhere. And there is Bhimsen Joshi, who used to spend his time here with Hiren Bhai. There have been singers like Pankaj Udas, Aslam Khan. There have been many, Wajahat Hussain Khan, and so many singers who have come here. There are artists and there's directors. Girish Karnad shot a film here. And Shobha Gurtu sang here also. The entire Gurtu family sang here. And so there have been so many artists who've come here. It'll be a wonderful place to reculcate the entire arts in this place. But when the power price, the other raw materials, rose or was no longer available in Karnataka,
Right.
in the 80s, it was no longer available,
What? The power?
the power.
Because the power price was not at the price
Because
we
the
needed.
power, no, because the power the whole power was dependent on the rain. And it was a hydel power state.
Hydro?
Karnataka got most of its energy from hydropower.
Hydro, okay, yeah.
So given that situation, there was no power. So during the 80s, there was an 80%, up to 80% power cut on all industry. So you couldn't produce anything.
Because the rains got bad?
You didn't have rains. You didn't have water.
Right.
You didn't have hydro.
Right. No water, no hydro, no energy like that. Okay.
So given that time, it took many years for them to build a thermal plant as an alternative and all of that. Now, in the 80s was tough. It was a very difficult time. We were struggling for survival.
Okay. You are not formally involved in the business just yet.
I could see it from outside.
Yeah, yeah. You're a child, you're seeing your uncles and aunties or whatever having
And
a
mom.
discussion. Right.
88 is when I came in, when we were on our first BIFR package proposal. So they thought it wise to sell the office in Bombay.
Sorry, BIFR package is like when a company is sick.
Chapter 11.
When that people don't know what all this means.
Yeah. So anyone who
Bankruptcy.
knows Chapter 11 is towards bankruptcy.
Yeah, but
So
there's people
it
from
was
not
the same.
India here. That's
Yeah.
why. Just keeping that in mind. Yeah.
So usually everybody knows Chapter 11 because
Okay.
America operates with that.
Okay.
And the whole world understands that.
Okay, but my friends are stupid like me when it comes to industry terms.
All right. So they,
Okay, so you're nearing bankruptcy.
and that's when I entered. And
So at the time you entered, it was pretty tough stuff.
very tough, very
It was going downhill.
I think the family had taken the decision to sell the unit,
The entire thing, lock, stock, and barrel.
lock, stock, and barrel. They'd offered it to Jindal. I remember offering it to Mukund at the behest of my uncle. Of course, I protested that why would you sell something like this? But they were the wiser, older people.
Sure.
And so they knew better, of course. Lots of people made offers.
Right.
But somehow it didn't sell. And I am reminded much later that it's not possible to sell. Because even my efforts have gone to naught on that
A
front.
little aside on what he's talking about, my dad's a big believer after all these amazing experiences he's had, which we'll get into, in spirituality, and that some things are just written. And one of the things that we believe is that Dandeli is just a place that we are tied to and custodians of the land in a sense, and it's our responsibility to make sure it grows and it's a positive force for the people that are in and around it.
Absolutely. And it's a magical place. It has magical powers,
Definitely
spiritual
is.
powers in Dandeli, which anybody who has been associated with it in any way or form will,
As soon as you just stay a night, you know.
yeah, that's true. So I was given an offer to go and live there, happily took it.
In Dandeli.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I moved here. I remember coming in the first time I came in, the car that picked me up in the airport, the doors were tied with strings. It was very, very interesting.
They didn't have the budget to fix it or something.
The budget to fix it. We restructured what we were producing and why we were producing, reconfigured the products, and we had a success there. We took away all the people from the mining company because they were bleeding it dry.
Expense wise.
Expense wise, corruption was bleeding it dry.
Oh.
And we were able to turn around the company.
Nice.
We were also lucky enough that we had a little better power situation. And I remember going into Harihar Polyfibers and making a deal with them to give us some power, because there was a policy the government had come up with that since we can't give you power, you can go and
Ask.
do wheeling and banking with some other industry which has surplus power. So I had done that with Harihar Polyfibers, and that was also a game changer.
And you knew nothing about ferroalloys and industrial work.
I didn't know that. The first day Bharat put me into the office to run it. I had no clue. And one man came up to me and said, "We're out of limestone." What the heck is limestone? So he got a piece from the yard and said, "This is limestone." I said, "Oh, great.
Calcium carbonate,
What can I do?
CaCO3.
What can I do with this?" He says, "No, this is required. It's a raw material in the furnace."
Right.
That's how much I had to go into learning. So once you're put in charge of something, you learn.
Yeah.
So we grew substantially and very quickly. We produced steel, we produced ferroalloys, and after a while we found steel was unviable given whatever technologies we had. So we just decided to axe the steel and just stick to ferroalloys. That's what we did, and that gave us good returns.
Okay.
1997, everything went south. By then I was primarily running it independently.
Right, right.
All our mines were closed. With one stroke of a pen, they closed all our mines.
The
They
government.
said this should become a wildlife sanctuary. Because they drew a boundary of a wildlife sanctuary around our mines, because they couldn't find old trees in the entire district of Karwar. They had harvested the forest twice.
Who's they?
The forest department.
Right.
So, because they couldn't find old trees, they chose our mining area to make a wildlife sanctuary.
How come our mining area had old trees?
Because we didn't wipe out the trees and mine.
Right.
We only mined where we needed it.
Yeah.
So we didn't mine the whole area. We had 10 square kilometers in mines,
Whoa.
right? So we could have wiped that entire out and made a lot of money as forest contractors, but that's not our mission.
Yeah.
And that wasn't what we.
So even then, before it was trendy, for the lack of a better word, you were quite environmentally conscious, connected to the trees,
Absolutely,
the nature.
absolutely.
That's awesome.
But anyway, we lost all our mines.
Right.
And as a result, the viability of the ferroalloy unit went. At the same time, the price of power had tripled that year.
Jeez.
So in one stroke, we went from viability to non-viability
Completely.
and survival mode over the next 3 years. 97 to 2001 was survival.
Yeah.
So we survived.
And you had a family and kids then.
Yeah.
Right.
We survived only to find that we totally shut in 2001. And since 2001, I have no explanation on how we survived, except that's in God's hands.
Chapter 2 Father Finds Faith. Okay, so 2001, the whole company shuts down, which is a massive dramatic change from the fact that it was a behemoth in the 70s and absolutely making a lot of revenue and good things as well, like livelihoods for the people in the village and all of that. So 2001, huge change. You're now in charge of a company in 2001 that's shutting down, and it's today 2024. So in a summary, give us an idea of the last 23 years, 24 years. What's been happening in Dandeli? What's your life been like? What does your time look like? Has it been a peaceful shutdown, or what? Just give people like an insight into the kinds of things that you need to do because of this history.
Let's say that time about 1,000, 2,000 odd people in the mines. All of them left without a problem.
They understood like, hey,
you can't do
the
anything.
game's over, boys. Right.
So whatever the legal severances, we provided that.
Right.
And they were fine with it. They left. There was one segment that was not even our union that formed a kind of a make-shake union, decided to not leave, not take the settlement, but chose to go to court.
Labor?
About 70 odd people, that's it, 30 people now, 30, 40 people.
Because people passed away.
People pass away.
And there's our 1,500 people that left peacefully, a few hundred others that left with the union peacefully,
Yeah.
70 that just formed, okay?
Yeah, so now this is the union battle that we fight in the labor courts. So it's a process.
When did they file that case, these 70 people that weren't happy to take the
2002.
settlement? 2002. Today's 2024, and that case is still going.
2003, I think. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it'll go, and it's scheduled. If it keeps going, it'll go on for, buddy, you will have to take care of it. They've lost the opportunity at that time to take whatever money was offered to them. And now whatever you offer them now will look like peanuts to them because it's 20
of
years later.
Inflation, yeah.
This is one.
Right.
Then there was settlements. We sold our hydro projects and we made enough money to settle all our debts. So we paid all our debts off. So when we paid all our debts, one of the banks which had played an instrumental role with
Keep
us throughout these years
Yeah.
had a change in the management because the next management took over and they had a different view. So even though we had done what we call a one-time settlement, and we had at that point agreed on the understanding that once we do our settlements, they will also do a settlement. So they did the settlement, those bank officials, but the new management doesn't see it that way. They would like to fight further. So that's the legal case that we have.
So the bank's also gone and just made a case.
So we have a bank case. If it goes to a normal court, we'll win because any normal court will concede.
We've done the right thing at all times. Right. And court cases in India are notoriously known to take.
It can take long. No, even if you get a case, you can appeal. No, it goes to the next case. If you
Yeah.
appeal, it goes. It's not only India, it's all over the world. That is the process, the legal process.
Right.
So this is what I've been doing for the last couple of decades.
Cleaning up the mess, the lack of a better term.
And we have some legal issues on the land. So that will also take its own case, time. But I guess we continue. We have to do what we have to do.
So yeah, we'll transition to kind of like the present state in just a second. But just to paint the picture, at its peak, how many employees did Dandeli have, the campus?
Lalbhai's time?
Lalbhai's time?
Lalbhai's time was 5,000.
5,000. And in your time, at least at the time of company closure,
Company closure,
2,000?
I would say 1,300,
1,500. And today?
maybe 10, 20.
That's insane when you think about that, isn't
30.
it? So for the last 20 years, you've been somehow surviving. And I've grown up watching this because I was born in 94. Company started to go downhill 97. 2001, we were in school and we very much knew dad had this stressful thing on our hands. Just one sec to shout out mum, because at that tough time in 2001, mum looked around and thought she'd start something on her own. And of course, with dad's business knowledge and guidance, she created a chocolate factory. So I'm very lucky to have two very entrepreneurial parents, and mum's quite a super mom. She just went and made these amazing products and helped us through school and everything with her chocolate making skills, which is now a 3-floor factory just 5 minutes down the road from our home in Bangalore. And so, yeah, I've just kind of like grown up watching mum do her thing, dad give her some guidance on the business front because that's his strength. And then somehow find a way to make his monthly payments for Dandeli, which is just going to say it like it's loss making, right? Like it's not been easy to sustain at all for the last 20 years. So anyway, because of these court cases and issues that my father has spoken about, we always kind of adopted this mentality in our family of, well, there's so much we can do with Dandeli, there's so much potential, but let's do it after the cases are settled. Let's do it after this happens. Let's do it after that happens. And it's really strange. In the last year, we've had like a bit of a shift in just family energy. I've definitely felt it myself. I know mom and dad and my brother have as well. And my dad would put it to the fact that we've been doing some special kind of prayers to do with ancestral prayers, basically.
So one of the things we did is when we got into trouble, we settled with the rest of the family. But it also happened funny because I was keen to go to Australia lock, stock, and barrel. I was just
'Cause we
I
were
said,
there.
I'll leave, and we had got citizenship. What is it?
Permanent residency.
Permanent residency.
Just before we went. Yeah.
So I went to the family and I said, I want to go to Australia. You can handle the company and all the affairs, and I can leave. And they threw a fit. That you've been running this stuff for the last decade. Now we can't handle all the problems. It's better you handle the problems. But if I have to handle the problems, then I can't handle it.
And get 5 approvals.
Get 5 approvals and things for all this. So either I do it or you do it, or no, let me out. I really want to get out.
Fair enough.
So in their wisdom, they felt it was better that I took it over and did go abroad. So I took that decision. I stayed back to keep it going. And that's when I took it over from the rest of the family. So that's how we did that.
Yeah.
I had started looking at houses in Australia, where to live.
Upper Coomera, Gold Coast. That's where we were looking.
And either Brisbane or Gold Coast or Sunshine Coast.
Yeah.
I think we had
It's
moved
paradise
towards
there.
Mumbai.
Yeah.
To our thinking process.
From Mumbai to Mumbai. Anyway, I want to ask you, Dad, how does it feel to think that after 20 years of running this thing and it being, if you don't mind me using the word, stagnant in a sense, compared to how it was and now how it's been for the last 20 years, where it's just these beautiful bungalows that have been sitting there, remnants of the time, factory rusting and just kind of sitting there. And now we've had this recent change of energy in the last year where felt a lot of team spirit with the family. And myself personally, after my travels of 3 years of traveling and seeing nomad life, I also felt inspired when I came back to Dandeli after Australia and my 1 year in the camper van there, where I saw Dandeli with nomadic eyes. And I thought, wow, this could really be a place where people from around the world would enjoy living because it's in nature, it's beautiful. If you get some high-speed internet set up, people can work from here. And there's a river and there's a pool and there's so much to it. And I remember sharing with Dad then this idea of Dandeli being the ideal nomad village. And we said, yeah, great. I mean, what a vision. But of course, we'll do it after the case is settled. That was always kind of the energy that we carried. And in this last year, something's changed within us. And we've just gone, you know what? If we want to make something happen, we can just make something happen. And yes, like every business and like most things that happen in India and even around the world, as you said, you're going to get pushback from different, authorities or people or whatever it is. There's going to be problems in any sense, no matter what you do wherever in the world. I used to work at Uber, and so we actually alluded to the reference that Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, launched Uber fully well knowing he's going up against the taxi industry, one of the most powerful political unions that are out there. And he faced the bullets, and now look, it's on all of our phones. So we take a lot of inspiration from that story and think that, if we want to make this nomad village happen, let's just give it a go. And it was a big risk, a big leap of faith, but I in my heart of hearts felt like this would be right, and I decided internally that I'm going to start to stop my audio nomad projects and kind of lean into this, got the blessing from mom and dad to go ahead and make this happen. And so, Dad, I want to ask you, how do you feel that now that I've shared this vision with a few people online via my Instagram and then email, newsletter, there's now 135 people in a WhatsApp community called the Junglee community that are really invested and engaged and interested in this land that I once at least thought, oh my God, it would be a burden. But now we're seeing as an opportunity and a place to write a new chapter. So how does that feel for you, knowing there's so much interest?
Great. I feel thrilled that you have got this interest. But I do have a word of caution. Remember, there's a lot of work in there to make things happen. Challenges in the execution.
Yeah.
So I'm
It's a
sure
big
you'll
project.
overcome all of those. But go for it. Let's see.
Thanks, Dad.
We're all there.
I mean, if there's resorts around the world and digital nomad villages around the world that have sorted it, I'm sure we can sort it. And I do love building slick processes and smooth customer experiences. That's definitely a passion that I picked up at my time at Uber. And I'm keen to combine that skill with, nomad life and understanding the beauty of working from nature and working outside and meeting like-minded people and the magic that comes from that. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to do this, sit down with Dad, because there was a few of you, like Ronja from Australia, she actually made a comment saying, give me some more freedom fighter juice. I want to know the family story behind this place. One question she also had, which I think a few more people are interested in, is the staff. But let's say when people are in the bungalow and there's staff, right? Like there's people in the kitchen, there's people that are maintaining the pool, there's people
Half a
that are
dozen.
doing gardening. Right. Not asking about numbers, but more who are they? A lot of our expenses, the majority is salaries and expenses that go right back into the people of Dandeli. So can you tell us about who these families are, these people that help support Junglee?
Everyone has been a part of the original company. So it will be locals who live around the factory and are working either as the accountant or as the plumbing and mechanical engineering or electrical engineering.
So their families, their parents would have been working.
No, they themselves.
They themselves would have also been working, yeah. Okay, I have 2 questions for you and then we'll wrap this up, Dad. My first question is, after the ferroalloy shut down, and my dad's had quite a interesting experience with education, watching my brother and I get educated. Dad had a vision as well about what he wanted to do at Dandeli. Like, take yourself to 10 years ago. What did you want to do at Dandeli? Can you tell people?
You know, interestingly, what you have described as what you're going to do is quite clearly what I remember saying to our friend Neha, if you remember. She and I had really jammed on this. And what we had said is we would create a area where people could come and do their best work. And we wanted to build a school where people come here because they don't like the traditional schools. And when they came to the school, we would find a way to educate them using their area of expertise.
Yeah.
If they wanted to play cricket, we would find somebody to teach them everything about cricket.
Yeah.
How to score, how to shoot cricket matches, how to report on cricket matches, how to write journals on
Yeah.
cricket. In the process, you end up teaching them English, math, all the skills.
But
that
through
you
their
need.
field of interest.
Through their field of interest.
And Dad always called it a personalized learning center.
Once you graduate from here, you get a certificate
Yeah.
and you move on. That was the idea.
Thanks.
So,
I'll just pause you right there. What's really interesting is that in the recent discussions we've been having in our group, you're right. Like, this idea of yours seems to have planted a seed that is now forming in its own way, in a 2024 way. I always used to critique Dad's idea just a little bit to say that it may not be scalable to find, you need a cricket coach, get a cricket coach. You need a cooking coach, get a cooking coach. Today, the internet has solved that. We can learn everything we want at the push of a button. And the other idea we've been having as a community, just jamming on this concept, is how everyone has a superpower today and people are able to come to Dandeli and teach whatever they'd like to teach. So personalized teaching center in a sense, and therefore attract the people that want to go for that workshop or go for that performance or buy that good or service that they create. So it becomes a little creative marketplace naturally of its own, but everyone's on their own mission of learning whatever they want to learn, and they can choose to learn from the internet or from the environment around them or from the people around them. So in a way, it really does feel like the evolution of your baby. So last question for you. You've lived 60 years on this planet. Everyone in this community has lived on average half of that. If you had one regret in your life, one thing you would do differently in your life, what would it be?
adopt spirituality early. The earlier you understand it,
Okay.
the more peaceful your life is, and you'll realize that you're not here for any purpose. You're just here to experience life.
Yeah.
I remember I had all these lofty ideas that we'd be a great mining company, be a great ferroalloy company, a great hydropower company. And I've spent my life building those
Dreams.
facilities and dreams. And then during the process of doing that, what did I sacrifice? My time with my kids, my time with my wife. And I didn't have this number of holidays I should have had with the kids and my wife. And that was all available. I could have run down to Goa every few weeks or months or whatever.
Goa's just 3 hours from Dandeli, guys.
So we didn't. We did it once a year or twice a year,
Yeah.
possibly. We could have done it more often. So those are my regrets. Live your life. Stop trying to dream on something that you want to do, because your role is only to live.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, once you understand spirituality and you understand how insignificant your life is
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
at the end of it, you just make the most of it, make great relationships, make great friends, have a wonderful family,
Yeah.
and live towards those goals
Nice.
and appreciate all the good that comes your way.
Hmm.
That's basically what I would say. And underline, comprehend your form of spirituality, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be mine, it can be your own. And all spirituality is within you.
Yeah.
Anything else, anybody else who's teaching you or you're following it is just a guide.
Yeah. Nice. I think that's a great note to end on.
Super.
Thank you so much, Dad, for sharing the story. I hope you all also enjoyed listening to the story of the land, just so you know where you're coming and what history lies there. In the future, Dad and I have shared that at phase 3 of the plan, we would love to have these QR codes that are around the factory on different floors, or different trees or different parts of the campus that have an interesting story, which will have an audio bite of Dad explaining what used to happen there back in the day, so that it enriches your experience while you explore this beautiful 150-acre campus that we're going to get to live on and enjoy. So yeah, and if you hear this voice down the road, you know where you've heard it from and who it belongs to. Thanks, Dad. Give me a hug.
Yeah, buddy. There we go.
We are junglies. Love you, Dad.
Love you, sweetheart.